Francis celebrates Mass in a former Islamic State stronghold as he wraps up his historic tour of Iraq. Stakeholders call for calm in Senegal as opposition protesters step up pressure. And explosions rip through a military base in Equatorial Guinea. Hello and welcome to teleSUR. I'm Doris Polo in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the South. Pope Francis wrapped up his historic visit in Iraq with a mass in Kurdistan's capital, Erbil. Journalist Javier Martinez Brocal gave us some details ahead of the event.
Pope Francis is celebrating Mass at this stadium in Erbil, the last big set piece of his historic visit to Iraq. The stadium can hold a capacity of 40,000 people, but because of COVID-19-related measures, only 18,000 were allowed to enter the arena, with an empty seat between each visitor. Some people are also seated on the pitch in the middle. This Mass is very important and will serve as the Pope's final farewell to Iraq. Erbil, the capital of Kurdistan, is located in the north of the country, and according to the constitution, has enjoyed a certain level of autonomy since 2005. This is why Kurdistan has its own president, with certain independent institutions, but it's important that I emphasize that it's not an independent country. Most notably, the region where the majority of Christians live was heavily persecuted by the Islamic State between 2014 and 2017, with human rights violations committed in every corner. Still, most of its population are Muslims, and Pope Francis has previously praised Christians and the followers of Islam for their peaceful coexistence. During this Mass, the Pope is expected to bless a statue of the Virgin Mary, which was originally destroyed by members of the Islamic State. Her head was severed and her arms were smashed. Later, the sculpture was restored and replaced very close to the main altar, where the Pope would bless it. The arms remain hanging to symbolize that if something has been damaged, it can never be fully restored, but it would eventually be replaced with something new. This doesn't mean that it has lost its original beauty or charm. These scars will always remind us of the pain this nation has suffered. Pope Francis' visit has been long awaited, and it also fulfills one of Pope John Paul II's biggest wishes, that a pontiff would visit Iraq.
Thanks, Javier, for that report. Now, before his final stop in Erbil, Pope Francis met Christians in an ancient Iraqi church torched by the Islamic State group in the town of Karakosh back in 2014. After the Islamic State group was ousted in 2016, the Altahera church's marble floors and columns were restored, and the faithful gathered there on Sunday to welcome the 84-year-old pontiff. In his speech, Pope Francis urged people not to lose hope in these days of the global health crisis and great insecurity. He also asked people to say no to terrorism and the manipulation of religion before calling for women to be respected and protected.
Surely, there will be moments when faith can waver, when it seems that God does not see or act. This was true for you in the darkest days of the war. And it is true, too, in these days of global health crisis and great insecurity. At times like this, remember that Jesus is by our side. Do not stop dreaming. Do not give up. Do not lose hope. I would like to say a heartfelt thank you to all the mothers and women of this country. Women of courage who continue to give life in spite of wrongs and hurts. May women be respected and protected. May they be shown respect and provided with opportunities.
In other news, the Saudi-led military coalition said it has conducted airstrikes on Houthi military targets in Sana'a and other regions after the movement launched armed drones towards Saudi Arabia. The strikes triggered huge explosions in Sana'a and sent plumes of smoke rising to the sky. It is not yet clear if there were any deaths. Now, the Houthis have recently stepped up attacks against the coalition as they escalate an offensive to seize the Saudi-backed government's last stronghold of Marib. The Afghan intelligence chief prosecutor cited Mahmoud Agha has been killed along with his bodyguard in a suicide bomb attack. Agha was on his way to his office in the southern city of Lashkargah when a suicide bomber driving a car full of explosives targeted his convoy. 8 people were also injured in the blast. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack. However, the South Asian nation has been experiencing a rise in targeted killings, even as peace talks between the Taliban and the government continue in Qatar.
We were driving from this side of the road, and the vehicle which was the target was driving from other side. When my car got here, I heard the explosion. My friend, who was a doctor, got wounded on his face, and I got slightly wounded.
The West Bank city of Nablus has gone back into complete lockdown after a spike in coronavirus cases. Last Thursday, Governor Ibrahim Ramadan announced a total lockdown for 1 week starting Saturday. The ban includes a stoppage to the movement of vehicles and the closure of all shops and industries. Meanwhile, Palestine extended its coronavirus-related state of emergency by a month last week, following an increase in confirmed COVID-19 cases. Israel has vaccinated more than half its population with their first COVID-19 jab, but has so far provided the Palestinian Authority with only 2,000 vaccine doses. More than 2.5 million Palestinians live in the West Bank, with an additional 2 million in Gaza.
We did this, the closure of Nablus, due to the high numbers of people infected with the virus in the governorate, which led to the number reaching the red signal, which rings the alarm in the Nablus governorate. So sadly, we had to do this procedure. We know that the closure harms the economy. It harms the merchants and harms the poor, but the closure is only for public health.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute. Welcome back. In Brazil, social movements are accusing the government of mishandling the pandemic and letting people die in order to advance its political agenda. Our correspondent Brad Meir in Sao Paulo has the details.
As a new COVID-19 mutation overflows Brazil's ICU units, social movement leaders are accusing the Bolsonaro government of deliberately letting people die to advance its political agenda. Taking advantage of poor road connections to Manaus during rainy season, it now looks like the government deliberately slowed down oxygen delivery.
70 people died in 1 week, and we expected the health minister to send oxygen by plane. But he sent it via Highway 319, which is unpaved, and environmentalists are fighting for it to never be paved. Because the agribusiness lobby is trying to use it to spread the fires deeper into the Amazon. So he used the crisis to play politics with Highway 319.
As far-right President Jair Bolsonaro continues to tell his followers not to wear masks, as his government works to sabotage state health departments from importing vaccines, and the death count rises over 250,000, some people are beginning to question whether he isn't deliberately letting people die to save money on social spending.
The Brazilian government is openly ultra-neoliberal, and its project is death. The more people who are hurt, the better for them. That's the project underway in our country.
Meanwhile, health officials around the world are worried that Brazil has become a laboratory for new COVID-19 mutations. Brian Meir, teleSUR, São Paulo.
Shifting gears now. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has received his first dose of the Russian Sputnik V vaccine as part of the government's nationwide COVID-19 immunization campaign.
After vaccinating healthcare workers and other frontline personnel, it was President Maduro's turn to receive the jab.
We were waiting for the vaccination of the medical personnel to be done first. And like I said to the people, I am fulfilling my promises.
How many batches of vaccine have arrived in the country, President Maduro?
We have already received 60% of the purchased Russian vaccines, and we are expected to receive a shipment of Chinese vaccines on Monday.
President Maduro got the first dose of the Russian Sputnik V vaccine, which was one of the 100,000 doses that made up the first shipment of vaccines that arrived in Venezuela. Each vial contains enough vaccine to give 5 people their first dose, and after unfreezing, it should be applied immediately.
There are a growing number of studies which indicates that the Russian vaccine is very effective and generates a strong immunity. I was reading a study that was carried out in Argentina and was even covered by Russia Today about the Sputnik vaccine and its high efficacy. Thousands of people have already been vaccinated with it in Argentina. We are grateful for God and Russian scientists.
Governments are racing to obtain large amounts of vaccines for their countries, but this cutthroat competition not only puts poorer countries at higher risk, but also endangers the whole world as it leads to vaccine shortages. Delaying vaccination can also make room for new coronavirus variants to be born, for which the current vaccines might not be as effective.
There is a shortage of vaccines around the world. About 40 countries are using the Russian vaccine, while the European Union is carrying out more studies on it. So we'll see what happens. I have a lot of faith in using and combining the Russian, Chinese, and Cuban vaccines.
Everything is ready. Venezuela's vaccination campaign aims to inoculate about 70% of its population of 28.5 million people by the end of 2021. The campaign also includes foreigners, among them 6 million Colombians, and the government hopes at least 10 million people will already receive their jab by April as part of campaign's first phase. As each day, more and more countries began their vaccination campaign. The battle against the COVID-19 pandemic, which have paralyzed the whole world for nearly a year now, seems to have a chance to be victorious.
Getting the first dose hurt a little bit, but I'm finally vaccinated. I don't shiver or feel feverish, but maybe I will be able to speak Russian.
We need a good laugh more than ever during these difficult times. But now, let's turn to Cilia Flores, the wife of President Maduro.
Let's see how Cilia is doing.
Women make up more than half of Venezuela's population, while President Maduro's son was among the thousands of volunteers who participated in the Phase 3 clinical trials of the Sputnik V vaccine in the country. Did it hurt?
No, it did not hurt.
Cilia is stronger than me. It did hurt a little bit for me, but I feel fine. I just feel a little feverosky.
But the illegal economic blockade by the United States has made the purchase of more vaccines very difficult.
They have stolen our money. We have been struggling a lot to purchase vaccines. We made an agreement with the Pan American Health Organization and the World Health Organization so that they can order the release of $300 million worth of gold, which is part of the nearly $2 billion worth of Venezuelan gold England currently withholds from us. But these organizations haven't done anything about it yet. However, we are still going to guarantee vaccines for the Venezuelan people.
President Nicolás Maduro and his wife Cilia Flores will receive the second dose of the Sputnik V vaccine in 21 days. Meanwhile, a batch of 500,000 Chinese vaccines are expected to arrive in Venezuela on Monday. The country also expects about 10 million doses of vaccine to arrive in the country by April as part of the country's vaccine deal with various providers.
Turning our attention to North America, in the United States, people have taken to the streets in St. Paul to call for justice for George Floyd ahead of the trial of a Minnesota policeman charged with his death. Protesters and families who lost loved ones due to police brutality gathered in front of the Minnesota governor's residence. The trial against Derek Chauvin, one of the 4 officers indicted in Floyd's murder, is set to start on Monday. Many of the demonstrators are part of social movements which are pushing for other cases to be reopened and re-evaluated, as well as for legislation to address racial injustice and police reform.
My hope is that this officer and all of the officers are held accountable for the wrong that was done to George Floyd. My fear is that they won't do the right thing like they haven't done for the rest of our families.
I hope that Chauvin is convicted, not with a third degree, because what he did was bad. The world's seeing what he did, and I hope that they don't say that George Floyd died of a drug overdose when the world's seeing Chauvin knee in his neck.
Women's rights activists have rallied in the French capital, Paris, to express their concern with growing sexual violence in the European country. The protest was held as a run-up to International Women's Day, commemorated annually on March 8th. The activists have also called for more feminist strikes to be held on Monday against sexism. France has been tainted by violence against women for several years, and according to reports, the phenomenon increased by 60% during the second COVID-19 lockdown, which ran from November to December last year.
We must continue to fight violence against women, but also fight for
Welcome back. At least 4 powerful blasts have hit a military camp in Equatorial Guinea's commercial capital, Bata, killing 20 and injuring hundreds. Local television stations broadcasted footage of wrecked and burning buildings, with people, including children, being pulled from the rubble and the wounded lying on a hospital floor. The cause of the blasts are still to be ascertained, but early reports suggest the incident might have started at the camp's armory. Senegalese President Macky Sall has faced mounting pressure to speak out after a wave of deadly violence rocked the country on Sunday. The crisis prompted the ombudsman to advise President Sall to address the nation before it is too late. 5 people, including a schoolboy, were killed in days of clashes that erupted after the arrest of opposition leader Ousmane Sonko on a charge of rape, which he denies and says is politically motivated. His supporters on Saturday called for 3 more days of protests starting Monday, urging people to massively descend onto the streets.
Your Excellency, Mr. President of the Republic, it is extremely important that we give up this favor that seems to dwell in us when, at times like this, we are driven more by bickering than by listening. We have an obligation to mark this pause because we are at your disposal to listen to you and to extend our word. But it is yours that the people are waiting for.
In lighter news, Ethiopia has received its first batch of COVID-19 vaccines as it prepares to roll out its inoculation program. The 2.2 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine, manufactured by the Serum Institute of India, were allocated under the COVAX facility, which is working to give developing countries equitable access to COVID-19 jabs. According to the Ministry of Health, the vaccination campaign will prioritize healthcare workers.
It will start initially from health workers, who are the forefront in terms of vulnerability. but it will also include other frontline workers depending on who are giving essential services to the public and are at risk of exposure. And then we will be also giving for people who have comorbidities, chronic illnesses, diagnosed based on the also set criteria. And also it will also be given for aged population who are also at risk and of morbidity and mortality from COVID-19.
China has reiterated its commitment to working with Africa to combat the COVID-19 pandemic and to help nations on the continent rebuild their economies.
At the moment, to help African countries to fight the pandemic and bring the economy back on track is the top priority for China-Africa cooperation. Last year, President Xi Jinping initiated and hosted the extraordinary China-African Summit on Solidarity and announced a host of new support measures. So far, we have provided close to 120 batches of emergency supplies to Africa and sent medical expert teams to 15 African countries. We have started to provide COVID vaccines to 35 African countries and the African Union Commission. The construction of Africa Center for Disease Control headquarters, a project for which we are glad to provide assistance, has started, and cooperation between 30 pairs of Chinese and African hospitals as well underway.
With that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For TeleSUR English, I am Doris Polo. Thanks so much for watching.